Okay, so hey guys, so my name is Amanda Bell. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a third year medical student here at Texas Tech. I'm also one of the PAL tutors. And so what we've been asked to do is to make a little video talking about how we studied for STEP, kind of how that turned out for us, if we have any advice about things that we would have amended to our studying strategy, what we would have done differently, what we were glad we did, and then as well as just any kind of general information or kind of heads up stuff that we have to tell y'all, any kind of answers to questions that we've been getting from y'all about STEP studying and that sort of stuff, or questions that we had when we were going through that whole process about a year ago. So unfortunately, unlike my little review sessions that I do for y'all, I don't have a fancy PowerPoint or anything that I made up. Y'all are just gonna have to look at my face and bear it for this little period here. But basically to kind of give you an idea of where I'm kind of going with this, first I'll tell y'all what I did and how it worked for me. And then I'll go ahead and move into the kind of pros and cons of it, things I maybe would have changed, general advice that I have, and then just some things to think about, not necessarily telling you, you know, one way or the other, just kind of putting it out there for you to have, just to be aware of. So, and something that I do want to say before I get started with this is that feel free to take and use as much of this as you want, in part, in whole, not at all. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't agree with the way I do things or what my strategy is. I understand that it's not for everyone. And just because I'm saying it doesn't make it right or guarantee it. And it's certainly not the only way to succeed or do well or pass step one. So I'm just kind of laying it out there, and if you like it, you can use it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you first how I did and what I did, because when people give me advice, I always kind of want to know what their credentials are for giving me that advice, because I may or may not have the same in-game goals that they do. I may not be coming from the same place that they are. So I scored a 250 on STEP, 250. And when I studied for STEP, I did not start studying for it until after the last day of our systems disorders class. Ours was an SD1, SD2, y'all's is all together. But I didn't even think about STEP. I mean, okay, well, I thought about it as in I scheduled the date and stuff, but I didn't even think about studying for STEP throughout our systems disorders block. It was not until after we finished all of our classes, took our final exams, that I actually started studying for STEP. And so that happened mid to late April, like April 20 something. We finished class on Friday, and that Monday I took the CBSE and then started studying for STEP. So originally I was scheduled to take STEP on May 31st or 28th or something. It was at the end of May, but I ended up getting canceled because of COVID Prometrics cancellations. So then I rescheduled for like early to mid-June, like June 12th or something. And I got canceled again because of COVID. And then finally I scheduled for June 30th, and I drove like 5 hours out to El Paso to get a seat and was able to finally take it. So I spent about a good 2 months studying for STEP by the time it was all said and done. As far as resources that I used, I only used UWorld. That was pretty much my holy grail of studying for STEP. It's still the holy grail that I used in studying for clerkships. I found it to be really beneficial. So I used a little bit of the resources from the STEP Enhancement course, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in this video. But for right now, I'm just going to suffice it to say that I used a little bit of STEP Enhancement, but like 99% of my studying was from UWorld. And the way I used UWorld, so some of you may have gotten a chance to already look at what the UWorld entails. It's basically a big question bank. For us, there was a little over 3,000 questions, but they constantly are adding to those questions every day. So for y'all, it may be close to 4,000 now. But basically, you go through and you can select the type of questions that you want, and you can make a little mini test anywhere from 1 to 40 questions. And you can select questions based off of question type, so anatomy, pathology, physiology, or you can select it based off of organ systems, so cardiovascular, renal, biochemistry, endocrine, biostats, etc. Or you can use both filters. The way that I did it was I did it based off of organ system. I would try to kind of coincide it to the step enhancement course. So if each week of step enhancement kind of had a different organ system theme. So if it was cardiovascular, then on Monday I would watch the cardiovascular lecture videos, and then I would go and I would try to get all the cardiovascular questions done on UWorld that week. I liked it that way because I kind of got the satisfaction of feeling like I was checking off a section, and I got to like kind of see the progress I was making in a sense. I felt like I was accomplishing something. And then the other thing on UWorld is that you can have different test modes. So you can have like a true test mode where it's like, however many questions, 40 questions or whatever, you have like an hour long to complete them. And then once you complete them, you get to go back and see which ones you got right, wrong, answer explanation. Or there's tutor mode, which is what I used. And so you still, have your test of, 40 questions or whatever, but there's no time constraint. And you get immediate feedback after you answer a question. So you answer it, and then it'll immediately tell you, did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? With an answer explanation below the question, just like with Firecracker, except in my opinion, way better than Firecracker because I am not a Firecracker fan. And so the way that I used that was that I would go through in the tutor mode, and I would read the answer explanations for every question, regardless of whether I got it right or wrong, regardless of whether I thought I knew the material really well or had no clue what was going on. I would always read the answer explanation because I found that even if I got it right and I knew what was going on, there was always still something to be gleaned from that, because the answer explanations are very thorough, not just in explaining why certain answer choices are right or wrong, but also in going a little bit outside the scope of the question to include other testable material. So it's not like a bunch of extraneous stuff there that you don't need, like Firecracker, but it's stuff that is also testable, just wasn't directly addressed by the question. So that was what I did. And I also like the tutor versus the test mode because I feel like you get more, having the immediate feedback kind of helps make a better connection between, okay, I got this question right. I picked this answer choice and I got it right, or I picked this answer choice and I got it wrong, and here's why. Versus if it's in test mode, there's kind of a gap in time between you struggling to pick an answer choice and you seeing the result of that struggle. So anyhow, and I got through all the UWorld questions before I took step one, which is something that I would recommend. Yeah. So as far as how that fared for me, I was very impressed with UWorld when taking step one because in my opinion, the UWorld question writers were consistently getting it right as far as style of question, content that was tested on, as well as depth of content that was tested on step one. It was very similar. I didn't feel like there were any surprises. I felt comfortable, if you will, with the questions, in that they felt like what I've been seeing the entire time I was studying. There was a few handful of questions that were like just completely out of the blue. I don't even know what they were talking about, never seen it before. But I have a feeling that those questions were probably pilot questions, about or exactly 40 of your questions of your 240 question step one test are going to be pilot questions, so they don't count towards your grade or whatever. So anyhow, in that sense, I was really satisfied with how UWorld prepared me for step one. So as far as the time commitment that I spent, I told you it was about 2 months. And so every day during that 2-month period, I spent at least 10 to 12 hours, if not more, studying, which I know sounds ridiculous and borderline crazy, and it might be, but it was what I did. I only took 3 days, only like 3 days off during that entire 2-month period where I didn't look at any STEP material at all. Yeah, that does sound a little insane. And it's probably not the method that most mental health professionals would recommend you study for anything. And it's certainly not the only way to success. It was that my mentality has always been in both my academic and athletic careers. I'm going to bang my head against this wall until either it or I give. So I will say that it was definitely mentally taxing, and without sounding dramatic, it was probably also a little bit physically and emotionally taxing as well. I was pretty worn out by the end of it, but it got me what I wanted, and I was successful with it. So again, take it or leave it. But anyhow, so that's kind of where I'm coming from and what my strategy was. So now I'll talk a little bit more generally, perhaps, about just kind of advice or things that I would, looking back, things that I would want to have told my former self to kind of be aware of. So the first one is regarding like what resources you use for STEP. So my personality is that I want to use one resource, and I want to, just kind of stick with it, do it, to the nth degree. And that's going to be it. I don't like to use a bunch of different resources and pick and choose a little bit from everything. And from hearing other people in my class, in the class above me talk, excuse me, about their experience studying for STEP, that kind of seems to be the theme as well, that you really only need one resource for STEP. Because any, STEP studying resource was designed with the intent to be comprehensive for STEP, to be, fully sufficient in all that you need. So, I mean, theoretically, you shouldn't have to go and grab a bunch of different resources in order to get a comprehensive, plate of what step one is going to be asking you about. And in my opinion, but this may just be a personal thing, I don't know how you would have time to do more than one and do it completely, if that makes sense. So I would recommend choosing one and sticking with it. I can't vouch for any other resources besides UWorld, because I've never used Boards and Beyond. I've never used Pathoma beyond what we needed for class. I've never used Sketchy, never used First Aid. I don't know what else is out there, but I've only used UWorld, but I fully stand by UWorld. If I had to do this whole process again, I would do UWorld again just by itself, because it's been really good for me, and I was really impressed by it. The one thing though that I would change about the way I used UWorld would be, I told y'all that I did it like in categories, and I liked it because, like I said, I got that sense of accomplishment with, finishing all the categories. But I did find that by the time I got to STEP, some of the categories that I'd done at the very beginning of my dedicated time, that information had kind of deteriorated a little bit. It was certainly still better than what it was before I started studying for STEP, but it nonetheless deteriorated a little bit. So there was a few questions, not a ton, but a few on STEP where like I recognized the material, I recognized, what they were asking and all the little, keyword parts of it, but I couldn't remember what the right answer was. Like I knew I used to know it, but I couldn't, there'd be like 2 answer choices and I couldn't remember which one I was supposed to pick. So that was kind of a little bit of a frustrating feeling. So looking back, I think it might have been more beneficial to just have all the questions kind of in a pool. So that way you get, a few cardiology, a few endocrine, a few biostats, every time that you create a little test. So that's my 2 cents on that. As far as, since we're talking about resources, I'll talk about the Step 1 enhancement course also. Everybody always has questions on that. We had questions about that, as like, what is it? What, is it useful? So the way that works, there'll be some of you who are going to be required to take the Step 1 enhancement based on academic performance or whatever. So, but everybody in the class is able to participate if they want to, regardless of whether they have to take it or not. And so the way it's set up is every week it's kind of a different organ system, like I mentioned. And so on Monday, they'll have maybe like 3 or 4 hours of lecture, and they'll pull in different professors from, the previous blocks to come and teach. So some people they had were like Dr. Presley, Dr. Tenner, Dr. Ganapathy, Dr. Bobolescu, he was a renal guy, Dr. Pomeroy, people like that. And then there won't be anything scheduled for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday, they'll either have like a firecracker exam that they release for practice, or they'll have, they had a few subject MBME exams. So they had a cardiovascular subject MBME and a renal, which all those are, it's 100 questions only about cardiovascular, only about renal. And you can use, if you're required to take it, you have to do all of it. But if you're not required to take it, then you can choose as much or as little as you want. So I did not do any of the firecracker quizzes because I do not like firecracker. I did attend some of the lectures. What I would generally do is I would go and I would sit in for like the first 15 to 20 minutes, and I would kind of decide, okay, is this going to be something that's worth my time to sit here for 3 to 4 hours and listen to, or would my time be better spent studying? And nothing against the professors if the latter of those two options was the one that I went with. It could have just been that I already knew the material pretty well and I wasn't really learning anything new, or it could have been the way that he or she had it, set up and was presenting it just wasn't really jiving with me, whatever. But there's no hard feelings if you don't have to be there, there's no hard feelings about going. So it's totally okay if you, tune in on Zoom for the first, 30 minutes and then decide, this is kind of not what I need right now. And then just leave. Like nobody's going to hold that against you. Some ones that were super beneficial for me that I really liked were Dr. Ganapathy's biochemistry was really, really useful, and Dr. Tenner's cardiology, pharmacology were both really good. I don't know who they'll pull in this year and stuff. I know like Dr. Presley has left and stuff like that, but he's one of my favorites. But anyhow, talking about the MBMEs though, and I'll just kind of talk in general about practice tests for a second. So I'm not a big proponent of like practice tests during the dedicated step studying time. I know some people are like all about that, and they're like, oh, you need to test yourself at least once a week so you can see if you're making progress and blah 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 blah. You can see where you're at, and I mean all that's fine and dandy if that's your thing, but in my opinion, practice tests are kind of a waste of your time and a waste of your brain power. Especially if you're doing like full-length practice tests, those wear you out. So you probably won't be doing anything else the rest of the day. And a lot of times you don't really get feedback on them. Like on the subject MBME exams, a few days later, we would get like a numerical score, but I don't know which ones I missed or which ones I got right. And all I know is that I got, 78% of the questions right or whatever. So I didn't really learn anything from it. And even if you're taking a practice exam that does give you like the answer choices afterwards, the correct answers, a lot of times they don't provide you with an explanation. So you missed it, but why did you miss it? You got it right, but why did you get it right? So you either have to go waste time looking it up yourself, or you just wasted a lot of energy thinking about a question and you don't get any return from it. So that's kind of my little 2 cents there. I did not use any practice exams during my step studying period, other than the cardiovascular MBME that I took. I then decided not to take any more of those, and also the CBSE that you're required to take. So you may already know this, but you're required to demonstrate readiness to pass step 1 on at least one CBSE exam. So all of you, I believe, took the CBSE 0 back in the fall, which probably most, if not all of you didn't pass. I didn't pass it either. Very few people do. But then starting in the spring, I'm not sure what the timeline will look like for y'all, but they'll offer a series of CBSE. So the first one that they offered us was the Monday after we finished our SD2 course. But they offer 3 or 4. So if you don't get it on the first one, you can continue to take them until you pass and demonstrate readiness. So I demonstrated readiness on the first one and I didn't take any more after that. Um, okay, so that's step enhancement. So then the last thing I'll talk about is just kind of like picking out a timeline for how much you want to study, when you want to take your exam, that sort of thing. And um, I'll start by saying that since I did just talk about CBSEs a little bit, it's my opinion that which is not everybody's opinion, but my opinion, I think that the school prepares you really, really well for step one. I think their curriculum is really good, and it makes sense that it should be, because that's part of how they get accredited. And in a sense, it's one of their goals, their jobs, is to prepare you for step one. So if you have consistently put in the effort throughout your first 2 years of the basic sciences, and if you've been scoring well on your in-house exams and whatnot, keeping up, doing what's asked of you, I mean, I think that you should be pretty well prepared to take step one. When I took that first CBSE after our last block, I scored a 227. I hadn't studied for step at all, like I said, and I scored a 227, which is just a few points below like the national average for the step one exam, and certainly well above passing, which is like a 196. And so I say that not to be like, oh, you need to be there, oh, look at me, or something like that. I say that to mean that if you look, honestly at the effort that you've put in throughout the past 2 years, and you're, real with yourself about, did I keep up? Did I do well on the in-house exams? Did I, fully commit to the curriculum? And then if you're also honest with yourself about what you're looking to get out of step, are you looking to get a really high, super competitive score? Or are you looking just to pass, whether it be with a numerical grade or just like with the strict pass fail? If you're honest with yourself about both of those things, then you can kind of have a better idea of how much you need to study. So if you've put in a lot of effort and you've kept up and blah, blah, blah throughout the past 2 years, and you're just looking for a pass, you're not looking for something super high or competitive. I mean, I don't know if anybody at the school would officially condone this stance, but I mean, I think you would probably be ready to sit for step one without ever having to study any dedicated, and you would probably pass. So take that for what it's worth. And again, I'm not saying that if you don't pass that first NBME that that you're not going to do well in step one, or that, that you're behind, or that you've done something wrong. I'm just saying that you can kind of use that, knowing what you've put in and where you're trying to go, you can kind of use that as a gauge of how much studying you need. So just my 2 cents on that. I'm giving a lot of sense here. I don't know how much of it makes sense, but okay. All right. That's not funny. Something else I want to talk about on the timeline aspect of things. So it's my understanding that y'all are going to have, like if you take it before a certain day, then you still get a 3-digit score, but if you take it after a certain day, it's just going to be pass fail. That's my understanding. I'm sure Dr. Cobbs or someone much more qualified than me will talk to y'all about that. But so that's something to consider in making your making your timeline. Again, putting in my little opinion here, I would recommend taking it where you still get a 3-digit score, because especially with y'all being completely pass fail, and with them starting to take a lot of things off the dean's letter that you'll get when you apply to residencies, it's going to become harder and harder for you to separate yourselves from your peers, both at your school and at other schools. And so I think step one is a really great way, a really consistent, reliable way, an objective way to kind of set yourself apart there. So again, for what it's worth, there you go. And then another thing that I also want to mention regarding timelines and regarding the pass fail system. So we were in a different situation than y'all were at this time last year. So all of our basic sciences were fully graded. So like honors, high pass, pass fail, except for SD2. And SD2 was just like a mini block. It was like endoderm and repro. So y'all's is completely pass fail. So if I was in y'all's shoes at this point, I know earlier I told y'all I didn't start studying for STEP until after our SD blocks were done. However, if we were on a completely pass-fail system for all of that, I think I would have found it beneficial to start studying for STEP during SD, because an in-house exam grade of a 70 looks exactly like an in-house grade of a 100 when you're all pass-fail. So certainly if I had started studying earlier for step 1, I think I would have been able to keep more reasonable study hours during my dedicated, less than 10 to 12 plus. And I think I probably wouldn't have had to study for as long of a period of time. As it was, I ended up needing that full 2 months that I ended up having. It was a little bit of divine intervention there, because had I not gotten canceled for that May date at the end of May, I was only like halfway through UWorld at that point. And I still think I would have done well on STEP. Like I mentioned, I think the school prepares you really well, but I certainly wouldn't have gotten, I don't think I wouldn't have gotten the score that I did, as high of a score as I did. So that's, I definitely underestimated the amount of time that that I needed to get through all of UWorld. So just taking that into consideration. And with that, so I probably would have been too stubborn to reschedule had it not been rescheduled for me. But I do want to say that on that note, if you find that you are coming up to your test day and you're not sure that you're fully as prepared as you want to be, there is no penalty for rescheduling your exam to push it back or whatever. There may be a monetary fee for y'all. It was waived for us because of COVID. I don't know if they've reinstituted that yet or not, but there's no like academic long lasting consequences from that. So just so you know, I wasn't aware of that at the time. So there's no shame in pushing back your test day or whatever if you find that you've underestimated, or if you've overestimated and want to push your test day up instead of back. There's no shame in either of those. As long as you can find a seat, no problem. Maybe a fee involved, but so so there's that. Then 2 other things I want to mention about the timeline. So like I said, I had less than a week of a turnaround between taking step 1 and then starting clinicals, which was not a problem for me. I don't think I didn't feel any kind of particular burnout or anything in clinicals because of that. Clinicals kind of has this way of kind of, I guess, refreshing you a little bit and kind of re-energizing you, because you're out of the bookwork realm and you're into the real world where you feel like you're actually helping to some extent and you're applying things. And so anyhow, I don't think that's a problem if that's how you want to do it. But on the same coin, that there's certainly something to be said for having a few weeks off before you start your 3rd year, because those first three clerkships happen back to back and they stretch on for a pretty long time. So it would be nice to have a little bit of some downtime there. So that's just, I'm not telling you one way or the other to do it. I'm just kind of putting the information out there for you in case you haven't, heard about it or thought about it yet. So, and the last thing I was going to talk about, so if you're moving campuses, so I moved to the Permian Basin for my clinicals. So that's something also to consider, because that has to be done in that time frame between, the end of basic sciences and the start of clinicals. For me, it was kind of a unique situation because I'm from the Permian Basin, so I'm living here with my parents. So I went home between SD1 and SD2 when we made the transition to online, and it wasn't really a big deal for me, but I understand that most people who are going to Amarillo or the Permian Basin, probably it is a big deal. You're not probably moving back home or whatever. So you have to kind of factor that in, because if you do it while you're studying for STEP, that's certainly going to cut out some studying time, which may be okay, but you have to account for it. But you want to make sure that you move in time to, be ready to go when clinical start. So again, not advising one way or the other about that, just kind of putting it out there as kind of something to think about, be aware of. Okay, I think that's all that I wanted to address or talk to y'all about. Like I said, just because I'm saying it doesn't mean it's the way it has to be. It's certainly not the only way. My way is not the only way to pass STEP. It's not the only way to do really well on STEP. And and probably may not even be the best way to do well on STEP or to pass STEP. But it's a way that worked for me. And so I've tried to also give some just general advice and information that hopefully is helpful and not redundant or a waste of your time. Last thing I want to do is waste your time. I will say though that when you're studying for STEP, this is where I know that I gained a lot of kind of the fine tuning of my like clinical information during this time. And so a lot of what I learned during STEP is what I've been building off of during my clerkship. So whatever you do, I mean, taking in mind, what your goals are and where you're coming from and all, what your mindset is about this. This is kind of going to be a big chunk of what you're going to be building off of during clinical. So if you're really wanting to really succeed and do really well, it's important to really lay that foundation with your STEP studying. So again, you're not going to just fail clinicals if you don't, but depending on where you want to go and what how you want to perform and whatnot, that's just something to think about. So let's see. I don't think I have any other final words, which y'all are probably all very glad about. I know this probably was a bit longer of the videos, and I apologize. But if you have any other questions, or if you want me to clarify anything or want some information about whatever, something I might have missed, please feel free to contact me. My email is amanda.l as in Lena.bell@ttuhsc.edu. Amanda.l.bell. And then my phone number, if you want to text or call me, is 432-210-5634. So 432-210-5634. So good luck, all of you. It's going to be okay. You'll do it. You'll get through it. It'll be good. And you'll get to move on to, something a little more fun, a little more of a engaging and enjoyable aspect of medical school. So, all righty. Thanks, guys.